it's by the Walter magazine. Yeah, I remember talking to my parents about sex. You know, and that's really interesting. I mean, now my kids are adolescents and one's in college. I mean, it's totally different. They learn about sex through social media. A lot of social media stuff. I mean, the sexting that's going on in high school is rampant. That's how they learn about sex, through sexting one another. It's just really interesting. So things have really changed how we learn about sex, but it's a pretty predominant experience for most people, including current adolescents, to not learn about sex in a really healthy conversation about sex. Part of the reason is that is because it's vulnerable, it's intimate, and people don't want to talk about sex because they feel like it's exposing to talk about it. I mean, we're covered up with clothes for a reason, right? So interesting. Some theologians think that at the time, in the Genesis second part of the narrative of creation, when Adam and Eve covered themselves with fig leaves, it was really to prevent man from lusting after a woman and to curb the appetite for sexual contact, to curb it to an appropriate level of appetite for sexual contact. Once sin entered, lust was a part of sin, and covering up the woman was part of preventing lust from happening. That was pretty interesting. I don't know if I agree or disagree, but it's kind of a, yeah.
So does that mean that they don't think that's appropriate in marriage? Because there were only two people at that time.
Yeah, that's right. Well, they were covering themselves up from God, and that's part of the shame response.
Right.
Was to cover themselves up too. Yeah. Even, well, I mean, you're not always naked in front of your partner. And when you are naked in front of your partner, it's a vulnerable state to be in. Even in a marriage relationship, for most, it's so vulnerable. There's a lot of, well, we'll talk about it tonight, there's a lot of insecurity about nakedness in our culture. I'm not saying we all should walk around naked, but
It's the European way.
it is the European way, yeah.
And Hawaii.
And why? Certain parts of Hawaii.
So many people were naked on the beach when we went to visit. And it wasn't like a naked beach, it's just it's legal.
Yeah.
It's not illegal to be naked.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so what do you think are some sexual myths that are out there? You may not know they're a myth, you might think they're real. What do you think are some myths out there about sex? Okay, let's think about, let me help you. What does the movies and Hollywood tell us about sex? Because that's one of our primary sources.
If you have sex, you're going to STD and die.
Okay, yes, okay.
Come on, me girls, anyone.
Okay.
I couldn't hear what you said.
Sorry, you get an STD and die.
Yeah, sex leads to death. Okay.
That after you get married, you never have sex again.
After you get married, you never have sex again. That's discouraging. Yeah. What other myth?
Sex equals love.
Sex equals love? Okay. Yeah.
Most
Good.
people are active with lots of partners.
Okay. Yep.
Sex in marriage is boring.
Sex in marriage is boring? Oh gosh, yeah, okay. Yeah. How about the opposite of that? Like, sex should be amazing every time. Right? Like the fireworks of the movies? Yeah. And if you're not having sex, you're not having like 10 orgasms during sex, then you're not being sexual enough. I mean, if you walk through the checkout stands, I mean, the majority of stuff out there is about, how to increase your husband's arousal level to, 10 plus, and then how to have 18 orgasms in 32 seconds. There's a lot of emphasis around myths around pleasure, right? The societal goal of sexuality within our culture is pleasure-oriented, very highly pleasure-oriented. Here's something that's gonna blow your mind. This is the only diagnosis that has where you can have too little but not too much. Think of eating disorders, right? You can have too little but not too much. There's no hypersexuality disorder. There's a hyposexuality disorder. There's not a hypersexuality disorder. They won't accept it in the diagnostic manual in the last revision of the DSM because our culture isn't willing to accept the fact that you can be too sexual. That sexuality is something, because it's pleasure driven, that sexuality is something that it doesn't matter how much you have. What matters is how little you have, which also communicates a statement about sexuality. Right? You can go in and you can get your insurance company to reimburse you for not having enough sex, but you can't get your insurance company to reimburse you for having too much sex. come in the form of sexual addiction, right? Which is probably a little more, that's probably more prevalent than too little sex. Currently, especially with the advent of the internet. So, okay, what are any other myths? All guys want is sex? Can't believe you guys didn't get that one before me. I hear that from couples all the time. The wife's saying, all he wants is sex. All roads lead to Rome. Right? They distrust any other type of sexual touch or non-sexual touch because they all lead to Rome. Yeah, that's a really common statement. Okay, let's keep going here. How often do you think married couples have sex?
Yeah, that's right.
This is about a myth. 2 or 3 times a week?
My first question was, how old are they?
Yeah.
Like, this went in my head.
This is
like,
just a survey of all married couples. A robust survey. How often they have sex. We gotta vote for 2 or 3 times a week? Okay.
I'll say once a week.
Once a week? What else? Any other votes?
Go what I thought early on, which was never.
Never? At least my parents never did it.
Yeah,
except
no,
for
they
times.
never.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other votes? Not more than that or less than that?
I'd say it's less than
Less than that? What do you say?
that. Twice a month, maybe?
Twice a month? Okay.
Not me.
This is not about self-disclosure. You guys. This whole lecture is not about self-disclosure. Just bring out questions for you to answer. That's what I was afraid of, right? Once a year. Okay, so the national average, 23% have it 2 to 3 times per month. 24% have it once per week. 31% have it twice per week. So 12% is 4 to 5 times per week. 1% daily. 2% never. And then 8% less than 1 per month. So twice per week is the, so this is the national average, but you see it's all spread out, especially between these. You know, once per week, 2 to 3 times per month. So pretty much the average is about 1 or 2 times a week. So you're right about that. The national average is 1 or 2 times a week.
I would be curious how that falls, like your age, and if you have small children. I think each phase of life
We're
looks
talking about
different.
that.
Just married looks different.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of not a very clear statistic because you look at yourself, you know, in different phases of life. That's going to be
Yep.
different when you have babies. Like
Sure.
completely.
Some people are hypersexual during pregnancy, and some people are low sexual drive during pregnancy. It's really interesting. Depends on whether it's biological or psychological, and those are the 2 elements that play a lot in sexuality. I had a client that I worked with. This is a couple, and they, when they first got married, they put $1 in a jar every time they had sex to save up for a grip. And after a year, I kid you not, they said they had over $600. That's a lot of sex. Yep. So they're saving for grip. So I mean, I don't know that there's necessarily a prescribed amount that is healthy, right? This is universal, yes. I don't think it's a prescribed amount that's necessarily healthy, nor do I think we should put that on people, because it's really up to the comfort level of the couple, what they define as being healthy or not healthy for themselves. And we'll talk a little bit about how does a couple define healthy sexuality with one another, how it makes sense to this. So, okay, what do you think are the most common sexual complaints for males and females? Too tired?
Not long enough.
Not long enough?
Or too quick.
Too quick? Not often enough?
Yeah, not really.
Too often?
Yeah.
What else? What about the actual sexual dysfunction? What do you think are the most common sexual dysfunctions?
Come on. Reading.
Reach orgasm?
There you go.
Real talk in here, alright? Okay, inability to reach orgasm, yeah, what else?
Erectile dysfunction.
Erectile dysfunction? Okay. Premature ejaculation? Okay. What else? What do you think is number 1 for women?
About us or that.
Women's most common complaint as far as sexual dysfunction?
Pain.
Pain? That's interesting. That is a common complaint, but not that. Lack of libido. Desire is the most common. Sexual desire disorder is the most common complaint of women. Hypoactive desire, mostly female, 34%, males are 15%. With desire disorders, men, it's erectile disorders, premature ejaculation, and impotence are the two big ones. Yeah, I can talk about that later. But so if someone were to come into the doctor and were to complain about a particular sexual disorder, women will come in complaining mostly about desire, men will come in complaining mostly about erectile disorders and premature ejaculation. And there's actual reasons for this that we can talk about, and there's reasons for this that we can talk about. What do you think our culture, what do you think is perpetuating a culture that perpetuates these problems?
Women should be chaste,
Women should be chaste?
like they shouldn't be promiscuous.
Okay. Yeah, okay, a little more. Why do women have low sexual desire? Not women in general, I'm just saying, why is it the most common they complain about? What is our culture?
It's been shamed.
Been shamed?
Sexuality's been shamed for
Okay.
women.
Yeah?
Well, I think we have this image of what we should look like the perfect body, and so there's a lot of shame when you
Yes.
don't have that particular, that self-image.
So body image
Yeah.
is a big deal? Yeah? Do you think women are more aware of their bodies than men are?
Yeah.
Totally, right? Yeah. So body image influences desire.
Right.
What else?
Connection?
Lack of connection?
Like emotion, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. How about erectile disorders? What do you think influences that? What's that? Performance?
You know, like
The pressure to perform?
I
Right.
mean,
Like
it's
the higher the
same
pressure, the more the body. Yeah. So, this is really important to note. Sexual response is autonomic. It's like sleep. You have to put the right conditions in place, and then it will operate. You cannot force yourself for you to have a sexual response. So, have you ever had trouble sleeping and tried to fall asleep? You know, tell yourself, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep, you can't go to sleep? Well, it's very similar with erectile disorders, right? It's like, have an erection, I can't have an erection. All the pressure, right? Because it's when you stop putting pressure on yourself that you actually, the autonomic system takes over. And so, that's a part of the reason, a lot of pressure on men to be sexual. Why else do you think? There's some really high correlational data between masturbation and premature ejaculation. Why do you think that is?
Because when you masturbate, you're just trying to have an orgasm, you're not trying to like let it be a process. And
Okay. Yep. How long do you think the male sexual cycle lasts, on average? Minutes. How many minutes? 2? It's more self-disclosure. How many is this one all night, right? No, it's longer than that. But not a whole lot longer. 7 minutes. You know how long the female sexual cycle is? 20 minutes. There's 5 phases to the female sexual cycle. There are 4 phases to the male sexual cycle. The man takes 7 minutes, the woman takes 20 minutes. Can you see how that might be a problem? Okay, so how long do you think the masturbation cycle is? 7 minutes? 2 or 3 minutes? Right? So you're exactly right. If you bypass the natural process of time that it takes to become aroused, desire, arousal, orgasm, and plateau, and resolution, then when you become sexual, you have a paired response to any presentation of sexuality and orgasm. So it's a quick response to it. Impotence is, I think, is much more around performance. There's a lot of, and age too, and there's some natural biological things that can happen with impotence. Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk about the evolution of sex in the last 20 years. What has happened with sexuality? Those of you guys have been around for a while can attest to this. So sexual images became accessible through the internet in what year do you? It's the 1980s, right? Okay, this has changed sexuality like nothing that's ever entered our culture before. These images were affordable, anonymous, and accessible. So before this, you'd have to go to the grocery store, to the 7-Eleven, you have to ask for the porn magazine that was behind the counter, and it was usually covered with something.